Visible now, who's been invisible for the last few minutes. But before that, I just want to thank the people that helped make today possible. And that includes Joyce Tamara, who's womaning the desk out there and helps with everything. She's on our board. Sylvia Wagensberg, who's done extraordinary duty today. She was a good chauffeur and is going to be our camera person. We have other board members here for CIYCL, Arva Rose, and we have Stephen Lesser, and who am I not seeing? And Karen Goodman, right, and Robin, thank you, and Robin, and so we have a great complement of people. Somehow it got warmer in here, although I did, I'll check it in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to now introduce you to our speaker. So Professor Yoshiji Hirose is chairman of the English department at Notre Dame Seishin University in Okayama, Japan. And it's interesting to note that Notre Dame is a Christian university in Japan where he's teaching Yiddish and Jewish studies. He received 2 master's degrees, one from Kansai University in Japan in English literature, and one from the University of Washington in comparative literature. He also received a diploma from the University of Oxford in Jewish studies. Our paths may have crossed somewhere along the way. He received his PhD in American literature from Kansai University in 2000. And in 2008, he was a visiting professor at Brooklyn College in the Jewish Studies department. His awards include the Malamud Society of Japan Prize for Academic Achievement. And his recently published books include, some of you will understand this, Verliebt in Jiddischer Sprach und der Jiddischer Welt. Who knows what that means? Yes? Wow, that's great. Everyone, it's in love with the Yiddish language and the Yiddish world, 2015. Yiddish Tradition and Innovation in Modern Jewish American Writers, 2011. The History and Present and Current Times of American Jewish Literature. Shadows of Yiddish on Modern American Jewish Writers. And the Symbolic Meaning of Yiddish. He also labored to translate into Japanese the joys of Yiddish. So, you know how difficult it is to translate humor from one language to another? Yeah, so you can ask him about that later. That would have been a special challenge. So some of you may already be familiar with Professor Hirose from his talks for CIYCL. He's been here a couple of times, and what he has spoken about in the past are the Japanese men noted for their quiet heroism in saving thousands of Jews from the Holocaust. And that included someone who's already quite known in the Jewish world, which is Chiyuni Sugihara. But he also introduced us to someone who is lesser known to most of the Jewish world, and this is Setsuzo Kotsuji last year. And in fact, he's become quite an expert in this arena, and recently the Israeli ambassador invited him to Tokyo to ask him about this amazing person, Setsuzo Kotsuji, because they are trying to figure out how to induct him in the righteous persons in the Yad Vashem Memorial, righteous Gentiles. but he's going to be, if you want to hear about that, you have an opportunity. If you missed our talk last year, you can see it online. We have able to post quite a few of our talks online on our website, yiddishinstitute.org, or you can hear it live tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the Museum of the Holocaust, where he'll be talking on this subject. One last thing is I just want to mention that on the 27th, there is kind of a community-wide commemoration of the Yiddish poets, the Yiddish writers that were killed on August 12th in 1952. And it's called Poetry Never Dies. It's going to be held at the Albetering, and it involves Yiddishkeit and cycle and so forth. So just so you're aware of that, we'll send out an announcement if you haven't already received it.
Why were they killed in 1952?
Stalin in Russia. Sorry, it was in Russia. That was I mean, a pretty quick way to wipe out a culture. You destroy all of the leading literary lights of it. So and they managed to do that. Okay, so without further ado, would you like the microphone stand, or do you want to hold it? Yoshiji Hirose.
Thank you very much, and it's very, very challenging for me to give a talk before you because you're an expert of Yiddish language. And, I am just Onheber from the Yiddish literature and Yiddish Sprach. So that, but anyway, I really hope that you will enjoy my talk. My talk is, as you may know, a lot about Elie Wiesel, but my talk is through the Yiddish perspective, so that I think you may enjoy the different perspective on Elie Wiesel and Isaac Bashevis Singer, quite a contrasting two writers. Okay, first I have to put this one. This is Elie Wiesel, of course. And this picture was taken when I invited to the World Holocaust Conference held in London, 2000. I was a bit younger. And this is an article of part of the article of Yiddish Forward. And as you see, Isaac Bashevis and andere berühmte historische Schreiber hat jeden Jahr 1978 bekommen sein Nobelpremiere in Literatur. So that Isaac Bashevis Singer is another very famous writer and contributor to the Jewish Forward, and he had received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1978. And the other one in 1986 ist Wiesel geworden, faktisch der zweite jiddische sprachliche Nobel laureate. Yiddish speaking writer, second Yiddish speaking writer received the Nobel Prize. Rehebech zu die der Monte politische Tour hat gewonnen den Preis. Gicher wie Schreiber, pinkliche, glänzende Beschreiber von Nazi-Horben. So that some of you are not familiar with the Yiddish letters, so that the last part is translated. Elie Wiesel's Nobel Prize, as opposed to the above mentioned political activist, he won the prize rather as a writer and more precisely as a brilliant chronicler of the Holocaust. Okay. And maybe most of you know that even One Street Gas is in New York Okay, heißt, jetzt nach Elie Wiesel. Okay. So, New York City street is named after Elie Wiesel. Maybe you know. Many of you know that. Okay. Yes. Oh, thank you.
That's where the Neue Museum
Okay.
is up. Yes.
And this is Elie Wiesel and the world remains silent. And you know, the night is very, very famous and well sold, but maybe a few of you know the fact that Night was written originally in Yiddish in 1956. Buenos Aires, it was published. Und die Welt hat geschwiegen. This is the original title of Night. See? And 56, you know, it was published in Yiddish in Buenos Aires. It is herausgegeben in Buenos Aires in 1956. And later, La Nuit, 1958, the French translation, and Night, 1960, translated by Stella Rodway from La Nuit. And number 4 is Night. This is a new translation by his wife, Marianne Wiesel, from the French version, 2006. This is the history of the Night. But today, I'd like to talk mainly about the, next one, please. A Yiddish Perspective, Slew the Forgotten, Elie Wiesel and the Bolshevik Singer. Okay, and first, Elie Wiesel and the Holocaust. Second, The Voyage to the Past in the Forgotten. Forgotten is a novel. It's a very well-known novel by Elie Wiesel. And third is the role of the gravedigger. This is a very mysterious figure in that novel. And 4 is the Yiddish of the dead and the modern Hebrew for the armies. And this is the title of the chapter. 5, Yiddish-speaking Jews and their faith. And conclusion. This is the order of today's talk. Next, please. Okay, so that before I get into the novel Forgotten, 1992, published, the protagonist, Malkiel Rosenbaum, and his parents, Elhanan, a former partisan, and his mother, Talir, Zionist. Okay, and obviously, a protagonist's girlfriend, Tamar. These are main characters of the Forgotten. Let me start my paper. The theme of Elie Wiesel's novel, Forgotten, 1992, is a loss of memory, one of Wiesel's most important subject matters. He emphasizes the importance of remembrance as the essence of life. Quote, "The opposite of memory is a sickness of forgetting, what today we call Alzheimer's disease. That is why I wrote a novel about it. I must tell you that it is one of the saddest stories I have written yet. I thoroughly studied this disease. I have met with its victims and with their families. There is no escape from it. Anger can be creative. Anger can represent the beginning of growth. Alzheimer's or forgetting is the end. For these reasons, my message is a very simple one. Never, never fight against memory. Even if it is painful, it will help you. It will give you something. It will enrich you. Ultimately, what would culture be without memory? What would be love for a friend without remembering that love the next day? One cannot live without it. One cannot exist without remembrance." End quote. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, seems to be bonded with and haunted by his memory of the Holocaust. However horrible the memory is, he tries to see it as one of the essential elements of his life. That is the reason why he wrote Night. It is his first and last memoir written in Yiddish under the title Und die Welt hat geschwiegen, and the world remained silent, 1956. His works are shadowed by an overwhelming fear of the past. In particular, in his confessional-style novel, Forgotten, revives his memory of the Holocaust and the Jewish hardship that lasted to the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. On one level, Wiesel is a writer about the Holocaust, a unique historic event. However, if we take a closer look at his work, we realize that his uniqueness lies not only in his delineation of the Holocaust, but also in his faith in Jewish mysticism, or timeless Jewish tradition. As seen in his Four Hasidic Masters, 1978, his mysticism is well expressed through his depiction of a particular vision. Often his characters are mystified by ghost-like beings. No doubt, the milieu of his Hasidic childhood is closely related to his strong sense of mysticism. In his memoirs, he recounts his boyhood and confesses his fascination with Kabbalism. I really believed that a few prayers and Kabbalistic formulas could hold the hangman and save his victim. The Forgotten is carefully composed of two mutually exclusive elements, the Holocaust reality and the long Jewish tradition, based on the eternal question of Jewish law, namely faith in God and Shekhinah, the Godhead. Only through memories can the present and the past be bridged, and Yiddish for Wiesel plays an integral part in conjuring up the past of Holocaust victims, Jewish martyrs, and the glorified religious life of traditional Jews. Isaac Bashevis Singer also insists likewise in his novel lecture, quote, Yiddish was a tongue of martyrs and saints, of dreamers and Kabbalists, rich in humor and memories that mankind may never forget. In a figurative way, Yiddish is a wise and humble language of us all, the idiom of frightened and hopeful humanity. As is clear here, Wiesel's nostalgic feeling toward Yiddish is very similar to that of Isaac Bashevis Singer, though Wiesel expresses uneasiness about Singer's work as a result of their totally different philosophies of literature. I will examine their different philosophies of art later. When Wiesel paid a visit to Hiroshima as an invitation of the Future of Hope conference in 1995, he insisted, I do not like comparisons. Every tragedy is unique, as is every person who suffers. Yet, Hiroshima and Auschwitz are linked. I believe that had there been no Holocaust, no Auschwitz, there would have been no Hiroshima. Not that one was a result of the other. It is just that the senseless killing of millions of innocent people prepared our collective unconsciousness for ever more radical ways of solving problems of war. And yet, there is hope, there must be. Similarly, Dr. Timothy Schneider of Yale University argues the importance of memories of the Holocaust in his recent book, Black Earth, The Holocaust as History and Warning, 2015. The claim of a right to destroy the world in the name of profits for a few people reveals an important conceptual problem. Rights mean restraint. Each person is an end in himself or herself. The significance of a person is not exhausted by what someone else wants from him or her. Individuals have the right not to be defined as parts of a planetary conspiracy or a doomed race. Understanding the Holocaust is our chance, perhaps our last one, to preserve humanity. End quote. Elie Wiesel deals with the theme of crucial memories of the Holocaust. The Judaism throughout the novel, the forgotten 40-year-old Malkiel Rosenbaum, the protagonist, was born in Jerusalem in 1948 as the son of the partisan Elhanan and the radical Zionist Talia. Malkiel was born in a free Jewish state as a result of the Holocaust, and he was named after Elhanan's father, a victim of the Holocaust. He is the son of Elhanan, a Holocaust survivor who, for over 40 years, has been suffering from his irreconcilable regret about his actions during the Holocaust. The older Elhanan becomes, the more blurred his memories become due to Alzheimer's disease. Out of compassion for his father, Malkiel cannot help but try to relieve Elhanan from the nightmare of his irreparable sin of being a bystander and remaining silent while his friend committed a crime. This unpardonable wartime incident is kept undisclosed until the last part of the novel, because it functions as one of the driving forces of this work. This covered-up incident compels Malkiel to go to the Romanian village where the crime that continues to haunt his father was committed. I'm here to remember what my father has forgotten. But do I live only to remember? Suppose life were only your ancestors' imagination or dream of the dead. Clearly, Malkiel has a strong filial attachment as well as a connection to the Jewish spiritual heritage. This compassionate inclination of the son makes it possible for Elhanan to confess his partisan role during the war before his memory of it vanished. Through Elhanan's narration, we learn about his history and about the Jewish milieu in Romania. It sounds paradoxical, but he remains alone in an iron box of unspeakable regret, even while speaking to his own son, Malkiel, who cannot fathom his father's firmly covered up secrets of the past. During the Holocaust, Itzik was Elhanan's best friend, and they fought together as partisans until Itzik rapes the young wife, Madame Elena Kalinescu, of an anti-Semitic fascist, because the fascist had murdered Jews. The rape is a form of revenge against the fascist. The fact that Elhanan could not save the victim from Itzik's violence haunts him, even though he offered her help after the incident. To trace his father's sin, which took place over 38 years ago, is a true objective of Malkiel's visit to Romania. In other words, the son tries to redeem his father by telling the truth to the raped woman and gaining her forgiveness. Quote, she, Madame Elena Kalinescu, gazed at him for some time before murmuring, "Then, would you allow an old woman to thank you and to kiss you?" She kissed his forehead. In the final analysis, Malkiel's purpose is fulfilled by her words, "Thank you for coming, and thank your father." Malkiel's girlfriend Tamar, a political reporter at the Times, is a star. Malkiel falls in love with her. This love story between Malkiel and Tamar alleviates the heaviness of Wiesel's usual theme of the Holocaust. In fact, Wiesel's many novels deal with love and romance as well as with the Holocaust. Tamar is a very intelligent and perceptive writer. She argues some people aren't made for happiness. Her remarks strike him as harsh, and it is perhaps because of this that he is attracted to her. He is not confident about his own fate because his father's natural element was suffering and the memory of suffering. In contrast to his lack of confidence, Tamar's strength is demonstrated well by her words. Happiness is a jealous god. He possesses you, but won't let himself be possessed. Will have to fight. In addition, her sense of humor saves him when Tamar visits his father. Elhanan possibly sees the resemblance between his lost wife and Tamar and praises her beauty. Tamar takes his compliment lightly by saying, "Now, don't tell me you want to marry me." Malkiel's negative view of life certainly owes much to his father, who is almost totally buried in the past. Thus, a son cannot be as optimistic as Tamar, who has expressed her wish to have many children with Malkiel. His negative view of the world, however, prevents him from being excited as a prospect. Quote, "I don't promise anything. Children, by what right do we bring them into the world? And what a world! Can we be sure they won't curse us for having given them life?" "I knew a man," Malkiel said, "who didn't want children, not because he didn't care for them, but because he loved them. He felt sorry for them. He thought of their future and said, 'Better let it come without them.'" Even with the help of Tamar's optimism, he seems unable to free himself from the burden of his father's pessimism. It is as if he felt doomed to relive his father's experience. Malkiel has been brought up in a milieu in which his father's sense of sin inevitably overshadows the son. The father's anxieties are transmitted to the son. Elhana's suffering from haunting nightmare is due to his humanitarianism. He is an observant Jew and he has a deep compassion for other people. Elhanan takes his gradual loss of memory through Alzheimer's disease as a sign of God's punishment for his sin. He suggests to his son, "What happened to him? I am a guilty man. That is why I am being punished. I gazed when I should not have gazed and turned my eyes away when I should not have. I saw a sin committed, a crime. I should have done something, called out, shouted, struck a blow. I forgot that. We can never simply remain spectators. We have no right to stand aside, to keep silent, to let the victim fight the aggressor alone." Still not very secret, every secret is disclosed to Malkiel. Little by little, Elhanan's personal history just after the war becomes clearer through Elhanan's narration. Elhanan's first and fateful encounter with Talia, Oren, Malkiel's mother, was in 1946. At that time, there were many centers in Germany where displaced persons waited for certificates to Palestine, and it was in one of these that Talia taught Zionist ideals. Strongly attracted by her passionate and fervent nature, Elhanan cannot resist her invitation to a Zionist meeting. In the process of narrating the past, Elhanan skillfully leads his son to Elhanan's regrettable acts, however painful it may be. Jews feel compelled to remember for the sake of their Jewish identity. Memory plays an important role in giving Jews an identity. In 1941, the Hungarian government expelled all Jews to Galicia as foreigners. Then the massacre started in Europe. During this period, the grandfather of Malkiel played an important role in the Jewish communities in Hungary. This memory of him should be passed on to the grandson, Malkiel. Through the journey from Israel to Hungary, Malkiel tries to trace his grandfather's story. Having disobeyed the order of an SS officer, the grandfather was shot to death. From the old gravedigger, Hochel, Malkiel learns about his grandfather, who was well respected in the Jewish community. In fact, Hochel is the man who buried his grandfather. In an episode about the gravedigger, Wiesel introduces supernatural story, in which we can sense his tendency towards mysticism. According to the gravedigger, he himself was forgotten, even by the German soldiers, and left alone, alive in the grave among the dead, while all the other people were deported to the death camps. In reminiscing about the ghettos last week, Hochel, the gravedigger, tells Malkiel of his spooky experience at the cemetery. One night he is held back by a voice from the grave. I am Rabbi Tzadok, the first rabbi to have the honor of serving this holy community. For 3.5 centuries now, I have watched over it from this grave. When indirectly rebuked for his rudeness in calling the gravedigger without any self-introduction, the ghost realizes that it lacked manners and introduced itself. Wiesel never forgets to give his readers not only a sense of suddenness, but also a sense of humor, probably aiming at lightening the tragic Jewish situation during the Holocaust. The first rabbi, Rabbi Tzadok, orders the gravedigger to bring an old cane from the last rabbi's house, and Hochel follows the order. In the end, Hochel is told to awaken the dead rabbis for the sake of the endangered Jews. In order to hold a Jewish court, all illustrious dead rabbis are summoned from the grave by the order of the first rabbi. Investigating the city, the dead discover the unexpected situation in which the Jews have been put. In the hope of saving the Jews in the train on the way to death, the dead rabbis discuss ways of rescuing them, but in vain. Realizing that they cannot do anything for their living, they have to return to their eternal home at dawn. It is not clear if this really happened or was conjured up by the gravedigger. The dreamlike story is based on his memory. Nobody can examine the reality of his narration. Still, this part of narration is well wrote to introduce an image of the mystical world of Judaism in East Europe during the war. This mysterious gravedigger plays an important role in transmitting the history of the Holocaust to Malkiel, who did not experience the tragedy. As Wiesel insists, the history of vanished shtetls should be told and be passed on to the next generation. Isaac Singer likewise refers to the role of creative writers, dreamers, as follows. Heaven and earth conspire that everything which has been be rooted out and reduced to dust. Only the dreamers, Yiddish writers, only the dreamers who dream while awake call back the shadows of the past and braid from unspun sleds unwoven nets. From Singer, short story, the Shadow of a Crypt. It is clear that Wiesel and Singer have much in common in terms of a writer's responsibility to conjure up the vanished shtetls of Poland, Russia, and other Eastern European countries during the World War II. In other words, the Yiddish-speaking Jewish communities through their literature. Now, the importance of Yiddish, and many of you know well, very familiar with the history of Yiddish. But two writers, they are also, they have similarities in terms of the importance of Yiddish language. Eastern European Jewry was more or less a religious community in which Yiddish was widely used among the poor Yiddish. Yiddish thus is a symbol of the weakness, poverty, and religiosity of Jews. Nowadays, to the contrary, the modern Hebrew has become the official language of Israel and carries its force. Israelis are no more tolerant than other nations. Wiesel implies a symbolic meaning of Yiddish in his novel, The Testament, 1981, dealing with a particular father-son relationship. Yiddish is a Jewish language, a language unlike any other. It tells of sorrows and joys unlike any others. It's a very rich language given to a very poor people. Wiesel does not make it clear, but he seems to include the modern Hebrew in any others. Yiddish is Wiesel's Mama-Russian mother tongue, and he explains its importance like this. It was in Yiddish that I spoke my first words and expressed my first fears. It is a bridge to my childhood years. As they used to say, God writes in Hebrew and listens in Yiddish. I need Yiddish to laugh and cry, to celebrate and express regret, to delve into my memories anew. Is there a better language for evoking the past with all its horror? Without Yiddish, the literature of the Holocaust would have no soul. I know that, had I not written my first account in Yiddish, I would have written no others. To this day, perhaps more than before, Yiddish fills me with nostalgia and Bankshaft. For Wiesel, Yiddish is not merely a means of communication. It also symbolizes his neshama, soul, filled with Jewish memories. In addition, for Wiesel, Yiddish seems to be closely related to his sense of faith, as suggested in God writes in Hebrew and listens in Yiddish. It goes without saying that Hebrew here is a biblical Hebrew, not the modern Hebrew, employed in the new state of Israel. Zionists like Talia and Isaac gave up Yiddish after the Second World War and chose Hebrew as their official modern Israeli language. Regarding the distinction between Hebrew and Yiddish, Israel Zamil, Isaac Bashevis Singer's son, he was my good friend, but passed away a couple of years ago in Israel. But anyway, Israel Zamil recalls an interesting episode involving Isaac Bashevis Singer and Menachem Begin, the former Israeli prime minister. Begin told Singer that Yiddish would never be like Hebrew. It was impossible to give an order to a soldier in that language. How could you run an army in Yiddish? He asked. My father replied that Yiddish wasn't meant for running an army. Yiddish was a language of peace. Considering these Zionistic ideas and Israeli policies, Wiesel's declaration of love for the Yiddish language is a manifesto of his position as a pacifist Jewish writer. Malkiel, the pacifist protagonist in search of his father's memory, expresses Wiesel's attitude toward the glorious religious past. There is no trace of shame in it or in his attitude to the peace-loving, non-resisting, Yiddish-speaking Jews before the war. As seen in the aforementioned episode of the Awakened Dead Rabbis in The Forgotten, Wiesel leaps from reality to fantasy and tries to erase clear-cut distinction through manipulating narrative perspectives. In their ways of handling the mysterious and religious world, we can see some parallels between Wiesel and Isaac Bashevis Singer. Both writers are deeply rooted in the Hasidic tradition. In similar ways, they recreate the demolished Jewish community, shtetl, in Eastern Europe and Russia, with love and longing for the past. However, when it comes to the manner of presentation, the writers are markedly different. Singer is not the kind of writer who idolizes the pre-war Jewish communities in Poland. Instead, he tries to recreate them as they were. Wiesel, on the contrary, has a tendency to emphasize only the religious side of all Jewish communities. Unlike Singer, Wiesel never writes about Jewish thieves, gunners, or Jewish whores. Instead, he tries to conjure up a society of observant Jews, in particular, the Hasidic Jews. In his novel, The Gate of the Forest, Wiesel writes about Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. When the great Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov saw misfortune threatening the Jews, it was his custom to go into a certain part of the forest to meditate. There he would light a fire, say a special prayer, and the miracle would be accomplished, and the misfortune averted. In a similar way, Bashevis Singer also writes many beautiful children's stories firmly based on Jewish folklore and Judaism. Denying these aspects of Singer's literature, Wiesel does not refrain from one-sidedly criticizing Singer and his works. Singer painted a picture of Polish Jews as sex maniacs, of pious rabbis who dreamed of nothing but idolatry on Yom Kippur Eve. Yes, I know it is fiction, but still. Wiesel's criticism is not always correct with regard to many of Singer's children's stories, like Why Noah Chose the Dove, 1973, The Poem Light, 1980, Reaches of Heaven, a story of Baal Shem Tov, 1980, and his autobiographical works like A Day of Pleasure, 1963, and In My Father's Coat, 1966. It is obvious that Yiddish writers who envy Singer's success among non-Jewish people have influenced Wiesel's evaluation of Singer. How many of you have read Cynthia Ozick's Envy or Yiddish in America? Oh yes, that's a very wonderful piece of work. And in that short story, she describes, such a people, Yiddish writers who envy Singer very much. Okay. And Wiesel's concept of literature is totally different from that of Bashevis Singer, as seen in Wiesel's response to an interviewer's question about the relationship between ethics and aesthetics in literature. Literature's task is to create an ethical awareness. Contemporary literature should not simply please or instruct the reader. On the contrary, it must scratch open the surface, lay bare the wounds, and call us to self-reflection and introspection. This is the task of literature today, Elie Wiesel, Conversations. It is clear that Wiesel tries to confine the domain of literature to only ethical awareness by denying the elements of aesthetics and spiritual enjoyment. In contrast to Wiesel, Bashevis Singer argues in Novel Lecture, there is no paradise for bored readers and no excuse for tedious literature that does not intrigue the reader, uplift his spirit, give him the joy and escape that true art always grants. There exist no Jewish robbers, pickpockets, pimps, or easily taken in fools in the literary world of Wiesel. However, Wiesel does not hesitate to write about sexual love, Despite the fact that Bashevis Singer and Elie Wiesel were born and raised in the same Eastern European Jewish culture. The recreated worlds portrayed in their novels are mutually exclusive. The idealistic picture of shtetls is graphically presented in Wiesel's The Testament, 1981, in a manner which characterizes his depiction of Yiddish-speaking religious Jews. I remember my childhood in Barassi, a Jewish home on a small Jewish street in the Jewish quarter. If I may paraphrase our great poet Ulamed Pelletz, in Barassi, even the river spoke Yiddish, and the trees, month after month, cleaned themselves or lamented in Yiddish. The sun rose so as to send Jewish children to Heder, and Kabbalists to the ritual bath. Time flowed in harmony with the rhythms of seasons of the Torah. It is an important pastoral landscape. It is an almost pastoral landscape described in terms of Judaism, a perfect harmony between religion and life. Even the 4 seasons are inseparably intertwined with the Jewish high holidays. This is the life of Yiddish-speaking Jews. In other words, Yiddish is a symbol of peaceful harmony among peace-loving people in a shtetl. In all likelihood, the difference between Wiesel and Singer has to do with the Holocaust. In 1935, Singer escaped from Poland for America. But Wiesel suffered torture and saw hell in Auschwitz. As a result, Wiesel is acutely aware that he has the responsibility of transmitting his memory to those who are not familiar with the tragic fate of the observant Yiddish-speaking Jews. By and large, Wiesel emphasizes the community. Singer, on the other hand, is more interested in describing a particular individual character, regardless of his experience of the Holocaust, than in highlighting the Holocaust itself. Dr. Itzhak Gottesman, University of Pennsylvania, argues. Singer was aware that he was not part of the tradition that emphasized the community. He had been criticized in the Yiddish world for this very reason, for placing character about the community. In other words, Singer is more motivated to create unique and universal human figures, deeply rooted in Jewish tradition, but freed beyond its boundaries. Wiesel intends to transmit the Holocaust memory as a universal tragic history of humanity through his novel, The Forgotten. This resounds with Professor Schneider's remarks. Understanding of the Holocaust is our chance, perhaps our last chance, to preserve humanity. Memory for Wiesel is also inseparably connected to Yiddish, the mother tongue of the author. Starting from mere nostalgia for Yiddish, Wiesel's thoughts become deeper regarding the symbolic meaning of Yiddish. At the core of Wiesel's remembering, there are always pious Yiddish-speaking Jews. Throughout his works, all fervent and disciplined ancestors in the past are Yiddish speakers. Wiesel family believes that Yiddish is unlike other language. For him, it is a language of the peace-oriented and religious Eastern European Jews before the Holocaust, well described in Wiesel's idealization of his boyhood. This is a symbolic meaning of Yiddish for Wiesel. Yiddish is a symbol of life of these traditional Jews and their fervent belief in God. In this way, For Wiesel, Yiddish symbolizes the memory of a long Jewish religious life among the pre-war Eastern European Jewry. Similarly, Bashevis Singer comments on Yiddish, his Mamaloshin. Yiddish was a tongue of martyrs and saints, of dreamers and Kabbalists, rich in humor and in memories that mankind may never forget. Elhanan's strong sense of guilt is regarded as a reflection of his own religiosity, and his tendency is successfully transmitted to his son Malkiel in the form of his father's haunting memory. Malkiel's voice to the source of his father's memory leads Malkiel to the full recognition of his Jewish tradition and his own identity. Living for decades in America enabled Wiesel to look at his fearful experience in Auschwitz from some distance. In other words, Wiesel himself sways between Elhanan, a Holocaust survivor, and Malkiel, a survivor's son with detached feelings regarding the Holocaust. Nevertheless, Wiesel's faith in God never sways. Wiesel's life and his belief in the possibility of world peace are firmly based on this unshakable belief in God. I have never recounted my faith in God. I have risen against his justice, protested his silence, and sometimes his absence. But my anger rises up within faith and not outside of it. This belief can be seen in what Elhana says to his son Malkiel at the end of the novel. If I am a Jew, I am a man. If I am not, I am nothing. A man like you, Malkiel, can love his people without hating others. I will even say that it is because I love the Jewish people that I can summon the strength and the faith to love those who follow other traditions and invoke other beliefs. Thank you very much.
Questions? Anybody? You want to ask some questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes. Need the mic?
Thank you so much, Yoshi. That was such an informative talk. I read a lot of Singer, but I hadn't read a lot of Wiesel, I think except Night. And
I like her.
the fact that there were such great differences between them, which you've pointed out so well and informed me so much, shows the breadth of Yiddish literature or Yiddish-inspired literature. It is not a particular, it is universal in many ways. And how each of them used language. And I do agree with the gentleman who just spoke about how they were as artists, their use of language, what they evoke in us, what each of them has to enrich us in terms of both memory and just that entrance into a way of life, whether we care about it or not. It lives, it lived, and said so much and was so rich. And thank you so much for really making me think about that.
Thank you.
Were you also interested in getting into the part of the religious part of Yiddishkeit, how everything connects more or less with Torah and so forth?
Yes.
Were you interested in that?
Yes.
Sure.
So what was your bar mitzvah, Josh?
Everybody?
Your bar mitzvah, Rosh?
Well, I'm professor of American literature, so that I'm also teaching Bible as literature, so that, you know, from Genesis to the Leviticus, and, you know, I try to teach the social background, religious background of these stories. I should say stories, you know, very rich stories told in the Old Testament or Jewish Testament, you know, so that even such known Jews like Japanese, you know, they love it if they understand very deeply, you know, because on the surface maybe there are different cultural differences, but still, if you delve into the depth, you see the sameness, the similarities a lot, so that's the importance of education. You know, we tend to talk about the surface, only surface. We are Jewish and we're different from others, and we are Christians and Islams. You know, we have to respect that surface, of course, but at the same time, we have to learn something about different culture things. You know, and try to understand. You know, I think that's a message from Elie Wiesel or Isaac Singer too. You know, they try to pay respect to non-Jewish culture too, in order to get their true identity as a Jew. So maybe that's very important in a message from these writers.
I had the great honor of meeting Wiesel and speaking with him. The reason I'm mentioning it is because of his Yiddish. It was in 1981 in Israel, the first World Conference of Holocaust Survivors. And a group of us met Wiesel. It was the night, it was very sad gathering, the night after Yitzchak, Andrik Zuckerman. He was the vice commander of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It was the night after he passed away. And I spoke with Wiesel, and I spoke with him in Yiddish. He was born in Hungary, and he spoke a beautiful literary Yiddish. I thought he was born in Vilna. Now another point about his writing. I think it was a night where he describes when they were deported from the hometown to Auschwitz, and his relationship with his father. Yeah. I think that it was maybe 1 or 2 pages, for these 2 pages alone, he deserved the Nobel Prize for Literature. His honesty in writing, his honesty in telling what happened, how he felt about his father and these moments of that inhuman hunger, where he prayed that his father would survive. It took a lot of courage, immense courage, to be able to write this for the whole world. I think he was a great personality, apart from being a talented writer.
Thank you very much.
I did Sheva Singer. He wrote a short story called A Friend of Kafka. I'd like to have your view of that story, because it inspired me to do a little bit of writing.
A Friend of Kafka is a good short story, but I read that for a long, long time ago, so that I cannot comment that accurately. But you know, these stories, not exactly a Singer's dialect connection with Kafka, but he heard many of the stories from other people and conjure up a character to talk about Kafka. And I don't know how true, you know, how truly he conjured up the image of Kafka in the Cho story. But as a story, I had the impression that as a story is very, very good and well thought. Yeah, that's what I thought because.
Excuse me.
If I may just respond to this. It's not about Kafka as much as it's playing, in a way, he's playing chess with God because he has such a miserable life. And he decides that God honored him. Every day God gets up in the morning and says, what didn't I do yet to him? And I'm going to cause it today. And he says, wow, God plays chess with me. I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to survive. And that's the whole story here. That's why he calls it a friend of Kafka.